Clint Eastwood ended a critic's career with 2 Oscars and a smile. It's 1993, and one of Hollywood's biggest stars just pulled off the most savage act of professional revenge ever captured on live television. Not with anger, not with insults, with success so undeniable that it made his harshest critics look like fools in front of 1 billion people. The weapon? A Western film that studio executives didn't want to make, that half of Hollywood thought would flop, that some critics were already preparing to tear apart before they'd even seen it. The target? An industry that had spent decades treating Eastwood like he was pretending to be a real filmmaker, like he was just a cowboy who happened to know where to point the camera. They said he had no business directing, that his work was unsophisticated, derivative, that he was embarrassing cinema itself. Eastwood didn't argue, didn't defend himself, didn't write angry letters. He just kept working. And then Oscar night happened. But to understand how brutal this revenge actually was, you need to know what they were saying about him 6 months before. By 1992, Clint Eastwood had been directing films for 20 years, and for 20 years, Hollywood had been patting him on the head like a child playing grown-up. Sure, he'd made successful films, but successful didn't mean respected. The industry saw him as Dirty Harry with a director's chair, a movie star hobby directing between action roles, someone who knew how to make crowds cheer but had no idea how to make art. His 1988 film, Bird, a jazz biography he poured his heart into, won technical Oscars but got ignored for Best Director. The message was clear: nice try, cowboy, but you're not a real filmmaker. White Hunter, Black Heart flopped in 1990. The Rookie that same year got dismissed as generic action trash. Critics wrote reviews that basically said, "What did you expect?" But the real problem was deeper than any single film. Hollywood had a bias, a belief system. Actors who direct are dilettantes. They're playing pretend. Real directors come from film school, work their way up, understand the craft on a theoretical level that actors never will. Warren Beatty faced it. Robert Redford faced it. The whispers that they were too pretty, too famous, too Hollywood to be real artists. And Eastwood, he had it worse, because he wasn't just an actor-director. He was a Western star, genre trash, the guy who squinted and shot people for 25 years. In the film world's hierarchy, that put him somewhere below a student with a Super 8 camera. Then he announced his next project, and the skepticism turned into something uglier. A Western in 1992 about old, broken men who can barely shoot anymore. Eastwood had been holding on to the Unforgiven script since 1983, 9 years waiting, because he knew he wasn't ready yet. The script was dark, brutal, a complete deconstruction of every Western myth Hollywood had ever sold. The hero was a washed-up killer who'd become a pig farmer. The violence wasn't heroic, it was ugly and consequence-heavy. There were no white hats, no easy answers. And Eastwood wanted to wait until he was old enough to play William Money properly, until his face showed the years, until audiences could see the weight of age and regret. Warner Brothers read the script and panicked. Westerns were box office poison. Silverado flopped in 1985. Young Guns barely broke even. The only recent success was Dances with Wolves in 1990, and that was Kevin Costner, an A-list star at his peak, not a 62-year-old action hero. The studio gave Eastwood $14 million. For context, that same year Lethal Weapon 3 got $35 million. Basic Instinct got $49 million. Eastwood cast Gene Hackman, who initially turned it down because the script was too dark. Morgan Freeman in a supporting role. Richard Harris as an aging gunfighter. All of them over 50. Not exactly the demographic studios were chasing in the summer blockbuster era. But Eastwood shot the film his way. Minimal takes, no fuss, trusting his actors. Filming in autumn so the landscape looked dying and cold. He was betting his reputation on a film nobody wanted. And when the first reviews started coming in, nobody could agree on what they'd just seen. Unforgiven premiered in August 1992, and immediately the critics split into camps. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars, called it a film of great beauty and grace that disregards all the conventions. The New York Times praised its moral complexity and visual poetry, but others weren't convinced. Some critics found the violence too graphic, said Eastwood was exploiting brutality while pretending to condemn it, that he wanted to have his cake and eat it too, making a violent Western while claiming it was anti-violence. Others called the film's moral ambiguity muddled, said Eastwood was confusing darkness with depth, that the film couldn't decide what it wanted to say about violence, heroism, or the Old West. A few questioned whether this was genuinely revolutionary or just another Western with better lighting. The debate got heated. Peace papers appeared. Critics argued with other critics. Was this a masterpiece or pretentious trash? But here's what nobody could argue with. Audiences showed up. Unforgiven opened at #1, made $15 million its first weekend, huge for a Western. Word of mouth spread. People came back for second viewings. Discussions happened in theater lobbies. The film crossed $100 million domestic, then kept going. Eventually hit $159 million worldwide on a $14 million budget. Audiences didn't care about the critical debate. They saw what Eastwood was doing, showing the real cost of violence, the mythology of the West collapsing under the weight of truth. They connected with William Money's struggle to escape his past. The film was generating the kind of cultural conversation that Oscar voters notice. But some critics doubled down, wrote follow-up pieces about how the film was overrated, how audiences were being fooled by Eastwood's star power, how this wasn't the masterpiece everyone claimed. The battle lines were drawn. Then December arrived, and with it came the announcement that would change everything. February 17th, 1993, Oscar nomination announcement. Unforgiven receives 9 nominations: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Eastwood, Best Supporting Actor for Gene Hackman, Best Original Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Art Direction, Best Sound. 9. The industry collectively gasps, not because Unforgiven was nominated, people expected that, but because of the sweep. 9 nominations suggested the Academy wasn't just acknowledging the film, they were declaring it the frontrunner. Eastwood's doubters had a problem now. This wasn't some fluke. The Academy doesn't give 9 nominations to embarrassments, to actors playing director, to derivative genre exercises. But the skeptics found their defense: nostalgia voting. They claimed the Academy was honoring Eastwood's legacy, not his filmmaking, that he was getting the Lifetime Achievement treatment without the actual Lifetime Achievement Award, that older Academy members were voting for the Clint they remembered, not the film he'd actually made. The competition seemed strong, too. The Crying Game, A Few Good Men, Scent of a Woman with Al Pacino's scenery-chewing performance, Howard's End for the prestige crowd. In the Best Director category, Eastwood faced Neil Jordan for The Crying Game, a genuine auteur with film school credentials. Some industry insiders predicted Eastwood would get nominated but lose, that the Academy would give him the honor without the actual win. It was the perfect compromise. Respect the legend, reward the real filmmaker. Eastwood said nothing publicly, just kept doing press, stayed humble. But nominations don't mean wins, and on Oscar night, Eastwood would face his toughest test yet. March 29th, 1993, the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles. Unforgiven is up for 9 awards, but everyone knows only 3 matter: Supporting Actor for Hackman, Director for Eastwood, and Picture. Win those 3, and the doubters have no ground left to stand on. The ceremony begins. Early technical awards go to other films. Sound goes to The Last of the Mohicans. Art direction to Howard's End. Not a good start. But then, and the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor goes to
Gene Hackman, Unforgiven. Hackman walks up, gives a gracious speech, thanks Eastwood for knowing exactly what he wanted and trusting actors to deliver it. First Blood. The film has credibility now. Joel Cox wins Best Film Editing for Unforgiven. The momentum shifts. 2 Oscars. The film isn't just a sentimental favorite, it's winning real categories against real competition.
Backstage, Eastwood sits calm. That same expression, no nerves visible, just waiting. The Best Director category approaches. This is it. This is where the Academy makes its statement. Did they believe Clint Eastwood is a real filmmaker, or was this all just a courtesy nomination for a movie star who's been around forever? The presenters take the stage, open the envelope. Inside that envelope is either validation or the confirmation that Hollywood will never see Eastwood as anything more than Dirty Harry with a camera. 20 years of directing, hundreds of doubters, decades of being patronized. All of it comes down to the next 10 seconds. The presenter smiles, looks at the card, and then they open the envelope for Best Director, and the Oscar goes to Clint Eastwood, Unforgiven. The room erupts. Eastwood stands, that slight smile, walks to the stage like he's done this 1,000 times before. No rushing, no visible emotion overwhelming him. Just a 62-year-old man collecting what he's earned. He takes the Oscar, feels the weight of it. His speech is pure Eastwood, brief, humble, no victory laps. He thanks the Academy, thanks his crew, thanks the cast for making me look good. Then he does something that defines his entire approach to this moment. He dedicates the award to Sergio Leone and Don Siegel, the directors who mentored him decades ago, the men who taught him that filmmaking wasn't about ego, it was about story, about respecting the craft. No shots at critics, no I told you so, no mention of the doubters at all. Just grace under the brightest spotlight in entertainment. The speech lasts 90 seconds. Then he walks off. But the night isn't over. Best Picture comes last, always does, and Unforgiven is nominated against 4 other films that the industry respects. The presenters return. Another envelope, another moment of tension, and the Oscar for Best Picture goes to Unforgiven. Eastwood walks back to the stage, second Oscar of the night, producer and director. He's now in rarefied company, joining a handful of filmmakers who've won both in the same year. This acceptance speech is slightly longer. He thanks everyone involved in making the film, mentions how long he'd waited to make it, how personal it was.
Then he says something that everyone watching knows is directed at the doubters, even though he never names them. This one's for everyone who was told they weren't good enough. The room knows exactly what he means. But the real revenge wasn't in the speech. It was in what happened next. 4 Oscars total: picture, director, supporting actor, editing. But the real victory wasn't the trophies. It was what happened after. Within a week, the critical reassessments began. Critics who'd called Unforgiven confused started writing new pieces about its intentional ambiguity. The violence they'd called gratuitous became unflinching honesty about the cost of killing. Film magazines ran retrospectives. Scholars analyzed the cinematography. The moral complexity that some had dismissed as muddy became the subject of academic papers. The film hadn't changed, the perception had. Because sometimes an Oscar doesn't just reward a film, it forces people to reconsider what they missed the first time. Film schools started teaching Unforgiven as a masterclass in revisionist storytelling, how to deconstruct a genre from the inside, how to use audience expectations against them to make a deeper point. The same techniques critics had called derivative were now subversive. The same pacing they'd called plotting became deliberately measured. Eastwood had done something remarkable. He made the industry reevaluate not just Unforgiven, but his entire directorial career. Suddenly, people were going back to watch the outlaw Jose Wales, Pale Rider, Bird, films they dismissed as competent but unremarkable, and finding artistry they'd been too biased to notice. The Western genre itself got revived. Filmmakers who'd been told Westerns were dead suddenly had proof that the genre could still matter, could still say something important about violence, mythology, American identity. Unforgiven influenced everything from the assassination of Jesse James to No Country for Old Men to Django Unchained. Eastwood's embarrassment to cinema had redirected cinema itself. But here's the beautiful part. The revenge kept going. And Eastwood, he wasn't done proving people wrong. 12 years later, 2005, the Academy Awards again. Clint Eastwood wins Best Director for the second time. $1 Million Baby. He's 74 years old now, an age when most directors have retired or faded into irrelevance, when Hollywood has moved on to younger voices, fresher perspectives. Eastwood just collected his 4th and 5th Oscars. $1 Million Baby wins Best Picture, too. Director and picture. The exact same double he achieved with Unforgiven. The man they said had no business directing is now tied with Francis Ford Coppola and Billy Wilder for multiple Best Director wins. He's in the conversation with Scorsese, Spielberg, Coppola as one of the greatest American filmmakers, and he keeps working. Mystic River gets 6 Oscar nominations in 2004. Letters from Iwo Jima gets 4 in 2007. American Sniper becomes the highest-grossing war film ever in 2014. Gran Torino, Changeling, Sully, The Mule. He's directing into his 80s, then his 90s. Each film proving that the doubters weren't just wrong once, they were wrong about everything. The actor-director bias that tried to limit them, shattered. The idea that genre filmmakers can't be artists, demolished. The belief that age equals irrelevance, laughable. Every film is another piece of revenge. Quiet, professional, devastating. Not by attacking critics, not by being defensive, just by continuing to make films that matter. But there's one more twist to this story that nobody saw coming. In 2021, Clint Eastwood released Cry Macho. He's 91 years old, still directing, still acting, still proving that Hollywood's conventional wisdom about aging, about genre, about who gets to be called an artist, all of it is garbage. The film gets mixed reviews. Some critics love it, others don't. And Eastwood doesn't care, because here's what the doubters never understood. He was never making films to prove them wrong. That was just a side benefit. He was making films because that's what he does, what he's always done, what he'll keep doing until he physically can't anymore. The Oscars didn't validate him. They just forced everyone else to acknowledge what he already knew. In an interview years after Unforgiven, a journalist asked him about the criticism he'd faced, about whether winning the Oscars felt like vindication. Eastwood's response was perfect. The work is the vindication. Awards are nice, recognition is nice, but I was going to make films either way. That's the real lesson. Not that he proved critics wrong, but that their opinions never actually mattered to his process. They said he had no business directing. He responded by becoming one of the greatest directors in cinema history. And somewhere in Hollywood tonight, there's probably someone being told they'll never make it, that they should quit, that they're embarrassing themselves by trying.